get 'em on.
Hey guys, today I thought of bringing something a bit different to the channel. As some of you know, me and TDA have mostly been farmers during the time we've played this game, which is approaching a decade's time at this point. Farming has always been a hot topic of discussion for the community as well, especially recently with all the changes to numbers regarding resource gathering, etc. So what I thought would be interesting is to give my personal opinions on the subject from a farmer's standpoint. Unfortunately, TDA will only be back in about a month's time, but these are topics we've discussed thoroughly together for years, so expect me to echo a lot of the points he would make as well. Without further ado, let's begin by addressing some of the general ways people feel about farming in AQ Worlds. I think these two are by far the most addressed complaints in this context. And yeah, I think everyone can agree that ridiculous RNG for items like Archfiend Doomlord are unhealthy for the game. The game forces you to gather a plethora of resources just to set back all your progress to square one if you don't happen to get the unidentified 35. It's not that hours of farming was all for naught, but that farming risks you to lose items. This is where my stance might differ from others in a sense that I don't necessarily mind hours of my time being for nothing if there is some sense of accomplishment. For example, me and TDA have been farming the hardcore Paragon pet ever since it came out, and we still don't have all the items. Still, if we get a decent party gathered up and get a couple of ribs in the day, we would both consider it a successful session. The drops themselves are not extra, but not an expected result in a day-to-day setting. And this is the thing that bothers me about people complaining about drops like the Doom Coin and Shadow Creeper enchant. The low drop rate becomes quite obsolete the more you need of that item. No one can get Sepulchre's Doom Knight armor with just one lucky drop, and the average time spent will go closer to the mathematical limit of the theoretical drop of said individual item. Additionally, I believe limited RNG can be good when we're talking about it being applied to individual quest items that you need many of. For example, in my experience, Nullgath farming was enjoyable back in the days of old Nullgath larvae, when you needed a level of planning on which farming quests you needed to complete. Missing Tainted Gems? Do a couple runs of the Cube regions. Low on Dark Crystal Shards? Kill the Chaos Beasts and Lords for the Essence of Defeat region. It mixes the process up, not much, but enough for it to not feel repetitive. Ah yes, the dreaded repetitiveness. Personally, I've always held a bit of a grudge against this complaint. Yes, if every farmable item was kill this boss X times, where the value of X would solely define the difficulty of it, you would call that repetitive and overall bad game design. But what I personally don't understand is the notion that content should be harder, not more time consuming. To these people I ask, why are you playing AQ Worlds? It is practically devoid of any mechanics because of too much ping, no specific ranges or movement speeds, which would enable kiting in combat. Basically, it has no micro potential. You do need coordination in large boss fights, but even those are rare these days since the endgame classes can solo most bosses. I mean, in the end, it's still the same browser-based Flash game released in 2008. You can't pretend that you could get WoW-esque dungeons, raids or PvP content to work in the game engine of AQ Worlds. Even the puzzles in this game are more buggy and annoying than challenging. All this about AQ Worlds and the lack of mechanics, I think it's fine. The game does a good way of embracing its platform and capitalizing on its strengths. What is it that people like in this game? The unique 2D art style and exclusivity creates value, an idea cemented in most MMOs. The art is made in form of the items, and people get exclusivity either via them being rares or making it a time-consuming act to obtain said item. Some of my favorite farming moments in the whole game were a combination of the two. The Unholy of Vulcan, which was only available for a limited amount of time, and one way to get it was by killing 11,200 undead pirates. Now 6 years later, I still remember how good it felt to get over the grueling process with our guild and get this unique rare armor. Now, some might say that the game will change with a server rewrite, and hints of micromechanics could be possible. The server rewrite is not going to happen. It was 99.9% completed 5 years ago. It isn't gonna be done with AQ3D receiving more and more focus resource-wise. Another counter-argument I might receive is that repetitiveness encourages botting. Yes, absolutely. But the game should not be designed around botters, they should simply be banned. And if RuneScape, a game similar to AQ Worlds in many ways, has had a working bot detection program for years, I don't see how it would be impossible for AE to do the same. With this issue in mind, let's jump into... This game has a lot of glitches that make a difference in farming, some more than others. There's the bank glitch, the quest glitch, and the rune glitch, to name a few. As for the quest and bank glitch, I would say they are relatively harmless glitches that almost everyone has probably used at some point. I have discussed about the quest glitch in particular with Alina personally in the past, and the message I got during that time was that while they are against the TOS, they are not at least insta-bannable offenses if one admits to using them at least. The thing I have an issue with AE regarding these glitches though, is how they act to enforce their rules. The bank glitch, which out of these three was simply the most harmless, it doesn't give you an advantage or shortcut in any way basically, it just lets you get more of an item / a resource than is possible by default. Why then would AE fix the bank glitch that was used mainly by hardcore farmers in the past, but not the quest glitch which was so much more advantageous in comparison? The thing that grinds my gears the most is the thing they did with glitched rooms. They never fixed the glitch, it still works in 2020. Instead what they did was to sweep it under the rug, reducing the respawn times of monsters by a drastic amount, assumably so players wouldn't feel the need to use a room glitch for faster respawns. I've seen a lot of people be overall pretty positive regarding the buff to mob respawns, but I frankly think it was a terrible idea, and I have a couple of reasons for thinking this way. I said barely any mechanics exist in the game, but there used to be a way which let you be more efficient in farming than people who just stood still. You could circle different routes in a map to minimize the time you had to wait for enemies to respawn. Now it is just plainly the most efficient way to farm by standing still and pressing skills. If AQ Worlds lacks difficulty, why would you enjoy the change that makes it even more mind-numbing and oriented towards button mashing? There are some more minimal reasons, like the fact that there was no delicacy in the change. The mob spawns so fast that it doesn't even have time to show the death animation, because it just reappears out of thin air, effectively making it seem like farming on crack. But one more major point against this change leads us to our next segment. Power creep is a term used to describe the infinite buffing and increasing of numbers in terms of damage, for example, that over time leaves the old content underpowered and unusable. This infinite buffing and no nerfing syndrome can be seen in AQ Worlds in many different instances, one being the aforementioned respawn buff. It was a massive deal, since now suddenly every single item in the game is faster to get. Suddenly, the threshold for new players to just quickly farm all the broken endgame items is even lower than before, which lowers the depth of strength differences between the levels of players. Again, when time is the only investment you put into farming in this game, I can't help but to feel a little salty about having to spend so much longer on the Necrotic Sword of Doom, Legion Revenant, Void High Lord, etc. This also goes for the ridiculous increase in weekly boosts and buffs AE puts on servers. I can understand the occasional XP, class and rep boost, but boosts for Void Auras and Dark Spirit Orbs? Come on now. Perhaps the most obvious and straightforward application of power creep in AQ Worlds though, is the Nolgath and Dage farming. Me and my friends farmed Juggernaut items with larvae for months at a time, and I can't even fathom how long it took to get the, at the time, new Milton items for players that farmed hardcore before larvae was even a thing. The story is pretty similar for Legion items, where you used to farm one Legion token at a time, and now you can get 10k in a day without too much effort. It's obvious that this trend makes old endgame items worth less than junk, but there is a more nuanced sort of solution that needs to be applied more in game. And that quote-unquote solution is to have more rare farmables. To demonstrate this, let's look at what separates the blood of Nolgath and, say, the Undead Legion Overlord, for example. It's not just that the other is no longer obtainable and the other is not. It's that from a farming point of view, you'll know the person who has blood will have done an insane farming effort to go through with the process, whereas even if you got Undead Legion Overlord 10 years ago, it means nothing now because anyone with a sufficient Paragon pet could get it in less than 30 minutes. The reason I am focusing on this point of increasing farmable rares to make the effort more worth it is because I know there is too much monetary value in releasing new Paragon pets and buffing Crag for AE to actually stop doing it. But it seems like the motive for this constant buffing and no nerfing to farming is just looking for the lowest common denominator, short-sighted applause from social media because yippee, I can get it easier now. This would at least help a bit in my opinion. Also, make more farmables that aren't tied to the Dage and Nolgath narrative, that way there would be less way to monetize shortcuts right away. I for one enjoy the good faction farmables a lot, like the Awe set, Blinding Light of Destiny, Arch Paladin, and so on. Lastly, I want to quickly touch on some of the annoying bugs that still have not been fixed after years, and I have a hard time believing no one has ever filed a bug report on these. The 1 minute timeout disconnects that for me occur mostly after dying to Binky or after getting a new rank on a class. I suspect the class bug has something to do with the cooldowns resetting on rank up, so the game breaks when you are able to use a 20-second cooldown ability 2 times in the span of 5 seconds, for example. As for Binky, it's possibly the most bugged thing in all of video game history. Sometimes you are not stunned, but you can only move once every few clicks, your ping feels like it's 10,000, sometimes you're unable to open or close the bookcase in Doom Vault, and it goes on. Don't even get me started on the text that appears on top of Binky. We all know it only locks one skill at a time, but it keeps spamming X has been locked for every other skill you use. You can heal yourself past 0 HP if you die to a counter, which Binky counts as a death, but you can go on as normal. The overall experience is just plain negative considering how many items are behind killing Binky a set amount of times. So hopefully you enjoyed this chit chat about farming, and let us know whether you would like to see more of this podcast style content in the future, featuring both of us obviously. That's it for now, take care, bye bye.